Hi class, this is JilMac. I'm the instructor for the Community College of Vermont and also for the Wyndham Regional Career Center. This video is about web development, and the students know that anything they don't understand, they can give me a call. Okay, web development. Let's bring up a browser. The browser I'm using is Chrome, and I'm going out to my website, JilMac.com, J-I-L-M-A-C. Just one L in Jill, and I click on Workshops and Classes. When I click on Workshops and Classes, the first class is Web Development, and the first class is always going to be the one I'm teaching currently, so I kind of mix up where they are on the left navigation. When we look at Web Development, for any college course, you have different course descriptions, and those course descriptions, let me blow this up a little bit more. These course descriptions identify what you're going to be learning in the class. So in this session, which is talking about assignment 4, and we are looking at Chapter 7, which is CSS building blocks. So in web development, we have been working on HTML files, and I kind of gave you a little bit of an overview of CSS, cascading style sheets. So I wanted to show you where this kind of ties into our course description. Point number 2 is identify current trends in web page use and include a content management system. So our content management system that we're using is Google Sites, and this is Google Sites. We also use Moodle, which is an LMS, a learning management system that all the different courses use. But I'm going to be teaching you a CMS, and the CMS I chose is Google Sites because most of you have a Google email address. So that's the content management system we're using. We're also, in point number 4, we're using different versions of HTML and XHTML. The version of HTML that this book covers is HTML5, which is the current version. And there are some older versions we'll discuss as the weeks go on. Number 5 says to create a web page in HTML using a text editor. And that's what our book does. Our book teaches us about HTML and what it takes to code. Now, a lot of us may not go on to coding HTML, but we will be interacting with CMS websites and technicians. We may even be managing different sections that work with an IT department developing web pages. And so it's important that you understand the language that's used to create the web. And so this textbook goes into that. We also cover more than just the textbook to kind of cover all the other kinds of things. Number 6 is to produce sample web pages using a graphic development tool, and our graphic development tools are Paint for some graphics, and also Google Sites does a lot of graphical development kinds of things. Use a variety of media files formats, and in here we are, and in our previous chapters we've been doing images and how to deal with images, but we're also going to be going into YouTube files and different other kinds of media. Number 9 is demonstrate the effective use of inline and external CSS for style and element positioning. And this directly relates to Chapter 7 and also for Chapter 8, which is working with style sheets. And CSS is a cascading style sheet. In point number 12, we are going to be covering describe logistics and cost involved in planning, producing, and finding a host. Well, in order to understand the cost, you have to understand what is a host. And our host happens to be STWeb, the student web server that we are setting up our FTP to do file transfers up to the host, and what it takes to maintain a website. And we're going to be doing that throughout the semester. How are we adding files to STWeb, and how are we accessing those files and web pages in STWeb? And number 13 is to design and build a multi-page website. We will be doing this in HTML as well as in Google Sites. So let's get to our Google site, and I'm going to go out to JilMac Teaches Sites. Now, JilMac Teaches Sites, if we wanted to get to this, we could, in our class, and I'm going to scroll up to the top, in our class, all of these links pertain to web development. And if we want to see how our site looks to other students, or what JilMac's site look like, you just click on Web Students. And you can see all the different students. In the first column, we have our ST-Web, and in our second column, we have Google Websites. So there's two different links to get to both of them. We're going to go in and look at my Google website that I've been developing side by side with the students. This happens to be the home page, but rather than calling it home for SEO, search engine optimization, you really should put a name in it, like JilMac Teaches Google Sites, or whatever the name of the site is. It shouldn't just say home. It would kind of get lost. As you can see, I have an assignment 1, which is my introduction, and then some links to my before and after. I also have an assignment 2, which has my research information, and then space for my before and afters. And the same with assignment 3. I haven't created an assignment 4 yet, so I'm going to add another page, and I'm going to call it assignment 4. And I always use 04 so it sorts in the correct order. And I'm going to create that page. So now I've created an assignment 4. Oh, I realized that I didn't type out the whole name in the other assignments. So I can just go in, and I also capitalize them. So I'm just going to rename this to assign 04, and I'll save that. And now you can see that, and I spelled it wrong again. I've got it spelled differently, so it's sorting after. So I can go up to my edit and correct that. ASSIGN. Okay, so it is. So let's just save this. And I'm going to refresh my screen with a Control F5 to refresh it. And now I see this in the correct order. So I'm going to edit this page to kind of prepare for it. So at the top of the page, I like to put my research. You can put it anywhere you like, but that's where I like to put it because most people do it first. And then after that, I'm going to put my before and afters. And we have 3 before and afters, so I'm going to put it there. And I'm just going to save the page so it's all ready for me. Okay. Now I want to go out and I want to look at the files. Now I can do it one of two ways. I can go back. I'm going to go back a couple of pages to where our class site is. And I can go into the textbook link, and I can go out to where I download the files, and I could look at the individual chapters. And why don't I do that first? Because I'm going to do it going along with reading the chapter. It makes it a lot easier. So here's Chapter 7. I'm going to open Chapter 7, and the first link is constructing a style rule. And the name of the file is constructing a rule. So here I've got this web page, but if I want to look at the text, okay, I'm going to bring up my FTP software. In this case, I'm using WinSCP because I'm on a Windows machine. And I have the ability to kind of size all of these. I want to go into assignment 4. So here on my server side, the right-hand side is my server side. The left-hand side is my PC side. And I want to go into Chapter 7. I want to look at the files, and this one happens to be constructing a rule. So if I double-click on it, it will bring it up in an editor. This editor isn't Notepad++, but this is kind of small, so I can do that okay. So here I have the code for this. And basically we have our HTML document, which is HTML5. We have our header information, and this time we have a lot more information in our header. We have the title, which is constructing a site rule, and then we also have this new one called style. So we're starting to have a new one called style, and this is telling us that the background color is yellow and that the color of the text is going to be red. And that's what we've done here. We've got a background of red and we've got a style. But this style is what we call an inline cascading style sheet. So our style sheet is inline. It's not in a separate file. It's in this file right here that we're working on, which is constructing a rule. And then what's in the H1 is, hey, I've got style, which is exactly what is here. So that's what's making that up. We're starting to see styles. When we read on page 169, the first paragraph says, let's face it, most of the websites I've shown you so far aren't particularly compelling visually, and that's because we've been focusing on the content. So what is the content? The content in a website is what's in between the body tags. That's the content. And the content of this says, hey, we've got style, and that's exactly what it says. But now, in this chapter, we're going to start working with cascading style sheets that are going to style our page. And we're going to start out small to kind of learn what they all do. So that's what this one does. If we wanted to do a before and after, we could change this color from yellow. This could be that you want a red background, and that the color of the text could be maybe green. We want something dark enough. So if we were to save that and run it again, begin again. So here I am wondering, why is it not loading? I've changed this code, I'm looking at it, it's correct, but I'm updating it on my website, JAM 08260, and we happen to be looking at it. We are looking at it on the book's website. So let's add another tab, and I'll just move that tab over so we can have them side by side. And here, I want to go out to stweb.ccv.edu, and I want to look for our class, which is 1151, and I want to look in my space, and I want to go to assignment 4, and I want to look in chapter 7, and when I look at inheritance, constructing a rule, when I look at mine, lo and behold, I have a red background and green. So you always have to kind of look and see where are you changing the code. So what I want to do is now this is an after, so I'm going to say rename, and I'm going to call this after. And I want to upload the before again because I overwrote it, and I want to make sure I have a before and an after. So now I have a before, which is just the rule, and I have the after. So now I can, here if I do a Control F5, I go back to the before. I want to take this link, and I want to go to my assignments 4 page. And my before, I'm going to edit this, and my before example is going to be this link. And my after example, I'll just put in the name here, dash after, is going to be this. So my after example is going to be this. And you can, to make this linkable, and you can change the font a little bit. So the after I might want to make bold. So I can bold that. And this I might want to make a smaller font. So instead of this big 16, I might want to make it small and linkable. So here I can make this font small and linkable. And so I have a before and after link. And I also like to say what I changed. And I changed the background to red and the font to green. And I can save that. And how you test it, because you always want to test it to make sure that you've done things correctly. I click the before link. Here I have the yellow, and it is on my website, on our ST web server. And sometimes when you go back, it's going to go back to the one before you made the changes. So you Control F5 or Apple F5 to load the new one. And you look at the after, and you have the red background with the green lettering. Okay, let's look at another one. And we're looking at this in the textbook. So I want to look at, on page 172, adding comments to style rules. So when we go into and look at that, the very top of page 172 on the right-hand side says comments can be long or short, although they tend to be short. So this is showing us, so here we have comments. Now this is showing us we are actually reading the CSS, the .css file. And you can read any .css file in a browser. You have to be able to, because your HTML has to be able to read CSS. So our browser can read CSS. And this is showing you how nicely this CSS, and this is an external CSS file. The first one was an internal or inline CSS file. This is an external because it is a separate file. It is a separate CSS file. And here we have comments. Because when you look at the code, when we're looking at the code, here's the code for section. Here's the, and they've kind of got comments for different things. Here's the code for image. And you might not know what that means. So you might want to put your English description of what this code means. And that is what the comment is for. We commented in HTML to kind of know where things were. And this is the comment type. This is a little bit different than HTML. This is a CSS comment. And a lot of times they'll put underlines or dashes to kind of denote, so it kind of catches your eye when you're scrolling down through this. So that is an external file. And let's see where we use external files. So I'm going to go to my WinSCP just to bring up this. And we're going to look at the second example. And the second example shows us how we use this. So I believe that the second example, let me go back. Let's go back in here. And so this example on page 174 shows us before the CSS is applied. So let's look at what that looks like. This is that empirical blue flax that we saw in Chapter 1. And there is no CSS in this. And we know that because we can go into the developer tools, or we could just view it. And we could look in the header. And we see some JavaScript, but we don't see any script. There's no script. And now I think I'll bring this up. In here. Go back to this. I'll bring this up here. We have this inheritance not styled. Here's inheritance not styled. If I look at this code is showing us that there's no styles in the header. And there's no style anywhere in the body. So now let's go back and let's look at what one looks like that's styled, that has a CSS. And this is showing us the CSS it's going to use. And this shows us more CSS, so you can kind of tell this is not styled. And let's see if we have the style. And here is inheritance, just plain inheritance. And inheritance, it's right here in this line. That shows us that we have our style sheet in there, and we're referring to it in a subdirectory called CSS. So let me show you where that is. So this one called inheritance, and if we look at the inheritance on ours in STWeb, here's inheritance. Now this one shows it's styled, okay? And this is using a little bit different font in a different color. This one is inheritance not styled. This is a not styled. This is a styled, where it has this. And the style sheet for that, if we're looking for it, is in this subdirectory CSS. And in CSS, we have the different CSS files. So those CSS files link to things that are in the HTML, and that's how we bring them together. And that's what Chapter 7 is showing us, is how we take the code for that file. Let's bring it up in Notepad++ so that we can see it a little bit better. I'm going to go to my computer. Assignment 4, Chapter 7. And let's look at this inheritance that's styled, and let's open it with Notepad++ so we can see it nice and big. And here it is. This is the line in inheritance right here, where it says in the header we're going to link, and we're going to link to a style sheet, and the style sheet is going to be found in the CSS directory, and the file name is going to be inheritance. If I wanted to look at that file, I could go back to my directory, I could go into CSS, and I could look at this file in Notepad, and I could see that this is the style sheet, that it's telling us that what the font family is going to be. And let's just bring this over a little bit so we can look at that code a little bit more. So let's do inheritance, the styled one, and bring up my editor. So it's telling us here that we have a font family, and that font family is going to be Veranda. Now, people that are looking at this with a Macintosh may see different fonts than those looking at it in Windows, and the textbook goes into that. It's telling us that we have a border. So we've got this border in here, this black border. We could change that border size. Suppose I wanted to change that border size to 5. And I could do that by saying File, Save As. And we would want to save it and overwrite it. And then we would want to FTP it. So we made a change to that CSS file. I have to go into the CSS directory. And when I go into the CSS directory, I'm going to see that, lo and behold, this inheritance CSS was updated on 2/17. That's today. And when I look at the server side for that inheritance file, it was uploaded on 1/26. And so I want to take this new inheritance and I want to drag it up and upload it to the server. And now when I look at this and I control F5, I'm going to see that that font, not that font, but I'm going to see that that border is now 5 pixels wide. And that's how I've changed it, not in the code itself, not in the HTML, but I have changed it in the CSS. And there's lots of good things that you can do once you change it in the CSS. So that border is 5 pixels now. So my before and after could be this this is now an after. So I could change this to inheritance-after, and I could change my code here to say inheritance-after. And I can save this, file, save as. And this is my after example. And in my inheritance CSS, I can rename this also, file, save as, inheritance/after. And now I can upload both of those files, because you have to upload both of them. So I would want this inheritance after to be uploaded. And this inheritance CSS I overwrote, so I really need to go back to my textbook examples to look in Chapter 7 to get that CSS, and this is the original CSS. Now I can go, and that's why I kind of tell everyone to you know, don't overwrite things. But if you do, you can always go back into them. So let's go into 7, and now I can download this. Good. Okay, and I believe that I have both of them up there, but you have to test. Yeah, you really have to test. So let's refresh. Here that is in my library. I'm going to refresh this with an F7. Control F5, I mean. So that goes to the old, where I have this very thin. This is my before example. So I can copy this URL. I can go to my, let's open another tab. Go out to my website, to our workshops, into our students, and go into my site. Go into assignment 4, and now I'm working on number 2, because my first one was constructing a rule. This one is going to be my before, and I'm going to put the URL in there, or the address, whichever you would like to call it. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller, and I'm going to create a link for it. I'm going to put my after example on here. And I'm going to say what I changed. And this time it's going to be the size of the box. And now I'm going to go back to the blue flocks. I'm going to go to my after, and I'm going to have to Control F5 because I FTP'd it up. Oh, no, I didn't, because I don't see it there. So I have to go back to my FTP. And that's why in the beginning, when you're doing this, oh, I do have it in there. It's in there. This is the CSS. But inheritance after, I hadn't moved up. Oh, maybe I haven't saved it at all. Go into my notepad. Here's my inheritance where I put in after, and no, I didn't save it. File, save as, inheritance-after, save it. So now I've saved that. Now I need to refresh this, so I say session files. I want to refresh it. I want to get, well, maybe if I go up again and then go into it. Yes, I now have inheritance after. You have to kind of refresh it yourself, and one of the ways you can do that is going up into a file folder and then going back in. So here's the inheritance after. I want to drag that over and copy it. Now that I'm here, I don't see it yet until I say Control F5. I have to refresh what I'm viewing on my server. Control F5. And here's my inheritance after. So it's there now. And I can always click on name to sort it nicer, or sort it by last modified. I'm going to sort it by name. Here's my inheritance after. And this is the URL, or the address, that I want to capture to put in my assignment. See how easy it is to see my assignment now that I have that favicon on there? As I hop back and forth, my after is going to be here. I'm going to make this linkable by blocking it and clicking the link, and then blocking it again and changing it to a little bit smaller. And I'm going to save this. Now I'm going to test it. I'm going to test it to make sure that when I click on my before example, it brings up the empirical blue flags before with the smaller line. And when I go back, notice how I hit it back. It brings me back to the old web page. I have to refresh it, Control F5, where I see my changes. I'm going to click my after, and here's my after example where I have modified the CSS to put a big line in. So that's the overview of Chapter 7 in our assignment 4. And it gives you a good overview of CSS. And I know a lot of you designers have been really waiting to get into the CSS. It makes it a little bit more complex, but once you start to get used to it, it will flow. And that's part of it, learning something new. Those of you who are going to be designers may be very interested in this. Some of you will be managing people who update a website, and you need to be familiar with what it takes to update a website. This is how we update an HTML website for CSS. I will be showing you in probably a week or two how we do that in our Google site. In our Google site, it's within, because everything we do is in menus. I'll give you a peek. We click the more actions, and we're managing the entire site. When we do a CSS, we're managing the whole site. And suppose in this one, I wanted to go, we're going to scroll down, and down at the bottom it's themes and colors. So if I go into themes and colors, let me go into themes and colors again, themes and colors, and I have to scroll up to the top. My background color happens to be a theme, but I could change this background color to, instead of this blue, why don't we make it a nice green? And so now it shows you what your background color is going to be. This is how we change the background color, which is basically the CSS, because we have colors and text. Here, if I wanted to change the text, I could change it, instead of a theme, I could change it to normal, and I have all of these different fonts. Maybe I would want to change it to a font that is like Arizona. So this would show you how it changes that font. Now that's kind of obnoxious. So I would want to change it to something that's a little bit easier to read. And I click this down arrow, and maybe Architect's Daughter, so that it changes the font and it changes the background. Then I'm going to save it. And now once I've saved it, and up here it says your changes have been saved, you can go back to the site. So we've saved it, and I want to go back to the site. So I want to go back to the site. Oh, I have to scroll up to the top. See how it was kind of out of, I hadn't noticed it. I have to go back to the site there. And now I have changed some of my style sheets for this web page. And how I did that, we'll do it again, is the gear, go down to manage the site. From managing the site, you have to, on the left navigation, you have to scroll down to themes and colors. And in themes and colors, you have to scroll up, and you can change your background from whatever the theme was to a particular color, and you can change your text to a particular font and even the size and colors of it. I'm just going to leave it at that. We click Save. When we do, depending on your screen size of your computer, you might be down here. You're going to have to scroll up and hit your Save Changes. And now we have the web page. I'll make it a little bit smaller so we can see the whole thing with this green and a different font. That's Chapter 7. If you have any questions, give me a call. And for those of you who are still a little reluctant to get into the coding and the HTML, please don't feel that way. Give me a call. We can work one-on-one. All we're doing is sharing screens. My voice will be right here with you. Ask some of the other students and other students who have gone through this with me. Please tell the students that are still a little reluctant that it's really pretty painless, and it helps you kind of get on your way. I can do everything that I could do with you one-on-one in person, and actually more. So you guys have a great day.